Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this fine world. We're here to introduce a very special guest and his co-author for a book called The Forever Swim. I'm joined by my co-host, Ned Denison from Dublin, Ireland. Hello, Ned.
Good morning, Steve. Good evening, people in San Francisco. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Antonio is a honoree of the organization. And I have one starting question for you, Antonio. Why South End Rowing Club? Why Aquatic Park? What's so special about this club that we both belong to? Tell us your connection, please.
You're on mute there, Antonio.
It all started when I decided that I want to do Ocean 7. And, as you know, in Mexico, we don't have cold water. So I found out there were two clubs in San Francisco at the Aquatic Park, the Dolphin Club and the Southern Rowing Club. And they had a sign that anybody could go in after 10 o'clock. So I would go to San Francisco and wait patiently until 10 o'clock. I didn't want to break any rule. And then I started seeing that the people at the Southern Rowing Club were a little bit more relaxed. So I started coming in early and just staying on the street to find out that somebody will go in to Southern Rowing Club, and I will sneak in, pay my $10, and go up to the locker room. And that's where I met Simon. And the first time I met him, I have to tell the truth, I couldn't understand him. I mean, he comes from this little island, and he doesn't speak English properly. So I couldn't understand him. But he asked me the obvious question, who are you and what you're here doing, what you're doing here? He said, why don't you join us? Every Friday we have a 6 o'clock morning swim. So I went back home to Lucia up in Palo Alto, and I said, God, I met this guy and he invited me at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday. I'm so excited I'll be able to swim at the Southern Rowing Club without having to wait until 10 o'clock in the morning. So I go and I meet Simon, and then I met Kimberly, and it was great. I just fell in love with the crowd. I fell in love with the atmosphere. I have many friends at the Southern Rowing Club. And I also have at the Dolphin Club. I started meeting people at the Dolphin Club as well. But there was, this community, and what it's really interesting, Annette, that you and I have talked about is how open water swimming connects you with many people around the world. And in the book, I have a whole chapter that tells me my experience in the Southern Rowing Club, and probably one of the one that I remember the most is one January swimming, and I guess the water was about 10 degrees Celsius, and I was just dying. It was really cold, and I'm just laying like a whale at the deck in the Southern Rowing Club, and Simon is there with his wife, and she looks at me and he says, "Don't be a sissy. I mean, if you want to swim the North Channel, you have to get used to this." So that was the type of booth camp that I got at the Southern Rowing Club. It was like, I would remember like Rocky having to go to Philadelphia and doing, being in the meat market, punching the meat. Well, that's what that meant to me, being at the Southern Rowing Club. I always got the cold water and, strenuous exercise, and then learning the ebb and the flow. And the first time I went in, I didn't know what it was. And swimming against the flow the flood was really hard. So the Southern Rowing Club has become a second home for me, obviously after Stanford, which is in the Bay Area. Never going to Berkeley, that's a no-no. But the Southern Rowing Club, the Southern Rowing Club is like a second home for me.
Yeah. For our audience that is not aware of the Dolphin Club and the South End Rowing Club, we have two other guests here, Diane from the Dolphin Club and Simon from the South End Rowing Club. And maybe Diane, go first and just explain, like, what is this magical place that we know is the aquatic park? Where is it? How do you get there? And then Simon, you can tell us sort of what is the swimming course and what is this place where Antonio did much of his training for the Ocean 7? Go ahead, Diane.
Thanks. This is I'm sitting right now in the Dolphin Club in San Francisco. We have Aquatic Park is the small cove that's right outside both clubs. The South End Rowing Club and the Dolphin Club are right next door. The South End Club used to be further south in town, so it's a little confusing, but we're over by Ghirardelli Square in San Francisco above Aquatic Park. And we get to do so many things. Lately, it's been a little bit difficult, well, with the pandemic and all, but we're starting back up. Everybody's been in the water. The water's been warm. The days have been warm. The commitment to just excellence in swimming at both clubs is such it's a miracle to just, you walk in, there are people who have done so many extraordinary things in both of the clubs, just the sense of adventure and the sense of personal challenge. And anybody will take you your next step, whatever that is, at both clubs. I remember a guy who swam in from the Farallons, 27 miles, and it was the first day I had swum to the flag and back, which is a half mile, and he was so happy for me. So just it's a marvelous piece of geography, but it's also an extraordinary place of generosity. So anybody who's in town should come by to either club, and really don't wait till 10 o'clock in the morning to come in. Just start banging on doors.
Thank you. And Simon, there's a famous quote by Mark Twain that said, "The coldest winter I ever saw was summer in San Francisco." And when I think of that, I think, man, cold. And when I think of cold, I think of Aquatic Park. Is that always true?
Sort of. Sometimes. It's funny. I'm Australian, as you can probably all hear, and I moved to the US about 12 years ago, and I remember swimming at the Bondi Icebergs, which is known as the cold water swimming place in Sydney. And when the water gets under about 15 degrees Celsius, under about 60, people freak out. People go, "This is too cold. We're going to get hypothermia. You can't do this." And I was one of those people. So until I came across and started swimming at the South End Rowing Club, and now if the water drops under 7 or 8 degrees, we freak out a bit. It's just a different mindset. I remember very clearly when I first met Antonio, and I spotted talent straight away. I thought, this guy needs to be
Thank you.
we can't have him going next door. But just want to echo what Diane said. The South End Rowing Club and the Dolphin Club, we do compete in some ways. We have a triathlon each year. I won't say who won last year because it was the South End, but we have a lot of fun. And the nice thing about our area is, people like Antonio, world-class swimmers, come to swim with us. The water is always cold in Aquatic Park. So if you're looking to swim the English Channel, if you're looking to swim, Sagaru, if you're looking to swim, the North Sea, some of these really cold water swims, there's no better place in the world to train, because it never really warms up. We are very lucky to have a lot of world-class swimmers, Antonio being one of them. And, we probably have more Ocean 7 swimmers, in our neck of the woods than any other part of the world. So it's pretty exciting to be part of marathon swimming and be based in Aquatic Park at one of the two clubs.
Great. Antonio, you selected a very interesting and very accomplished co-author, a man that I've been following for years and years and years. He has everything from the first book that I read from him, One Breath, but he's also written all kinds of Lonely Planet guidebooks and you name it. How did you and your co-author, Adam Skolnick, actually meet?
Well, remember when we were doing the Cinco de Mayo swim?
Yes.
Adam wrote an article, and I remember I was that day I was working. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in Hermosillo, and I was swimming in a pond, literally a pond. It was about 150 meters. So I got out and started talking to Adam, and I told him that I wanted to do Ocean 7, and he said, "Well, why don't you drop me a note whenever you go to the last one?" So I'm here in Donaghadee, and I tell him, "Well, I'm about to swim my last swim. Do you want to talk about it?" And he says, "Well, yes. Let me see if the New York Times would like an article." And he gets back to me and said, "The New York Times is interested." And I said, "Adam, but we don't know if we can accomplish it. I mean, the weather is really bad, and this is a very tough swim. And they said, no, I talked to my editor, and he's sending a photographer. I said, Adam, I really want to talk to the editor. So I called the editor in New York, and I said, look, I mean, this might not happen. And he says, don't worry, we'll send a photographer. And that's how I met Adam. So I finished Ocean 7. I finished in the North Channel. And for some reasons, we got stuck in London, and we had to fly to Houston on a Sunday. And I was expecting the article to be in page 13 with the results of the baseball minor leagues or something like that. And I arrived in New York, in Houston, turned my phone on, and I have all these messages from friends that I haven't seen or heard in many, many years. It says, have you seen the Sunday sports? And I went and bought in New York. I got out of the plane with Lucia, and the first thing we did is we run to the news to get the paper. And I was there, and because of Adam's great skills, we had beaten Bolt. Bolt has the first time that he had lost, and we were front cover of the New York Times, and we celebrated properly. And then later, the idea of the book was a seed planted by President Cedillo at a dinner we had, and he was bugging me all the time that I should write a book. And I just said, well, writing a book is like doing an Ocean 7 again. So I said to Adam, would you be willing to be my ghostwriter? And he said yes. And we had a great adventure. We really enjoyed the writing of, the speaking and the writing of the book. I would be able to tell him my stories. Some of them had to be edited by Lucia and Jimena because, we had the Toño facts. They had the Toño facts, the real facts, and the real facts. So that's how I met Adam, and that's how I wrote the book.
Yeah, I just to interject, I've been covering open water swimming kind of like I specialize in a couple of areas, and one of them is adventure sports. And what I write for the New York Times tends to be these underreported adventure sports stories. And the first open water swim that I covered were the deep enders, the guys from Ventura that did the swim from San Nicolas Island in the relay, which had never been done before. And so after that, I kind of enjoyed reporting on Jim McConaughey and those guys, and started to poke around for other stories. And I heard about Kim Chambers and what she was about to do. And she was going to swim the Sacramento Delta from Sacramento all the way to San Francisco Bay. And so I reported that story. She didn't end up making it, but that's how I first heard about Antonio, through Kim Chambers and working with her. And it was just like, as soon as I talked to Antonio to interview him for the Cinco de Mayo story, which I liked because it kind of had the political side and had the adventure side, which is exactly Antonio, but it's also the things I'm most interested in. And so it was kind of like a rebellion. It was a protest, but it was also a swim. And so how often do you see that? Swimmers getting together to protest for something really important. So the Cinco de Mayo swim was really cool. And then I remember hearing from Antonio that he was going to finish the Ocean 7. And I said to myself, I'd love to write that. I mean, that's a story. Like when you're a reporter and you hear that, that's a story. And then we both had I had lost touch with Antonio. And I think, Antonio, if I remember correctly, I just happened to email you at the right time, right? Like I hadn't been keeping tabs on you. And by the time I emailed you, you were in Donaghadee, because I emailed you first, I think, and then you said, yeah, I'm there.
I was in Donaghadee.
Yeah. So it just worked out. The timing worked out, and then when he invited me to write the book, it was an easy yes. It was, it's his life is so rich. It's not just the swims. It's what he's seen in Mexico, and it's really a story of both these amazing swims and what one person can accomplish. If they don't give up and they dedicate themselves, which, as you know, all endurance swimmers know, that's what it takes. It just takes continuing to do it, and dealing with suffering and dealing with setbacks and continuing anyway. But it's also this kind of modern political history of Mexico. because of the way Antonio grew up, where he grew up, how he kind of saw the economy change over time. We had to edit some stuff to make sure we didn't offend the offend the government, cover up past things. But we glossed over some things. But just to see how he kind of created a business as a young kid, and got his way to Stanford, and the whole story. If you only know Antonio from his swims and don't know his whole story, it's really remarkable. So it's just one of those stories you want to write.
Yeah. If there were like 3 words that summarize Antonio from your perspective, Adam, what would they be?
Well, I don't know about 3 words, but yesterday I was chatting with him on WhatsApp, and I asked him, how's it going in Mexico? And he said, well, right now the pools are still closed and the restaurants are still closed. And I said, you could stop right there. That's Antonio. Those are the 2 priorities. But no, I mean, he's generous and he's hilarious and he's an incredible athlete.
Yeah, thank you. And this whole book is centered around the Ocean 7, or at least it's where his journey takes him. And I want to ask Ned Denison, the chairperson for the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, just give the sort of background of where these 7 channels are, why they are so difficult. And I'll just name them one by one, Ned, for you. English Channel. What do people need to do?
For our sport, it's considered the Mount Everest of channel swimming. From England to France, some 21 miles, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. The water is not nice, not friendly, and of most interest, the tide comes in and out every 6 hours, sideways against the swimmers. So often a swimming path looks like a big S, or if you take 28 some hours, as Jackie did, it looks more like a big Z or a Z, depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah. And then Strait of Gibraltar?
Strait of Gibraltar is often the easiest of the swims. It's the shortest distance. It's from Spain to Morocco. It's actually not from Gibraltar, which is the small British enclave there. What makes Gibraltar particularly difficult is around the corner from where you start is the windsurfing capital of Europe. And they don't swim when the wind is strong. They don't swim when it's foggy. So the problem with Gibraltar is whether you get to swim or not. I simply advise people, go to Spain on a vacation or a holiday, have a great time. And if they give you a call for a swim, great. But otherwise, have a great holiday. No one has a great holiday in Dover, England. It's not that kind of place. But
never. The
Spain
worst is
isn't bad.
Dover. Dover is the worst.
Spain isn't bad.
Yeah. And the North Channel, Antonio's famous last swim of the Ocean 7.
So the North Channel is from typically from Northern Ireland to Scotland, although it doesn't matter which direction you do it in. For years and years and years, it was the impossible swim. It was finally done by one of our honorees, Tom Blower, I think in the 50s, if my memory serves me right. And until 7 years ago, I think only about 10 people had ever done the swim. When it became part of the Ocean Sevens, it became more and more popular. It is cold always. And the other less interesting thing about the North Channel is it's populated by lion's manes jellyfish. I remember going across on the ferry one time, and every minute on the ferry looking out, I could see at least 1,000 lion mane jellyfish. They're particularly nasty. They sting, and they can poison you from the inside and the outside.
Wow. And then going from right to left across your global map, you have the Catalina Channel.
Catalina Channel, from Catalina Island to Los Angeles, wherever on the coast, often further up the coast. You can go either direction. Typically, it happens on the day you want, so the weather is very forgiving. You typically get on a boat at about 9 o'clock at night at San Pedro. You jump off at a place called Doctor's Cove at midnight. The wind always picks up in the early to mid-afternoon, and it's always against you. And at the very end, if you're not lucky, there's an adverse current. My favorite story about Catalina is, some of you remember your very first car trip computer. It would tell you how long it would take to grandma's house, for example. And if you were stuck in traffic and the car wasn't moving for quite a while, the trip computer would come up, instead of saying, 20 minutes or something, it would come and say never. There was once a swimmer in the Catalina Channel, and the boat computer came up and it said never because the current was against it.
Yeah. And then in the middle of the Pacific, we have the Molokai Channel.
Molokai, beautiful Hawaii. What people don't appreciate about that channel is that's real ocean. That's real deep water. A swell in Molokai can be 10, 15 feet. The swimmer can be in the trough of a swell and see nothing. Won't be able to see the kayaker a few feet away from them, or the support boat. And recently in Molokai, they've had many swims aborted by sharks. For the South End Rowing Club folks, you might remember the famous footage of Rainey Pierce being basically chased out of the water by big sharks. Has its challenges.
Yeah. And then on the other side of the Pacific, in northern Japan, we have the Tsugaru Channel.
Okay, this is from one place on the moon to another place on the moon. Japan is a challenge for somebody who's never been there. It's a challenge for somebody who's been there a few times. But that's the Japan of big cities and undergrounds and taxis. This starts from a very small, not even a fishing port, a very small speck on the coast, in a town with not a lot of choices for dining, it's an unusual swim, incredibly strong currents, and probably the most fickle weather. Steve Redmond, who was the first of the Ocean Sevens, tells a famous story about being out there. Everything was going really well. It was maybe his third attempt. I forget the number. And all of a sudden, they yell, "Get out of the water, get out of the water." Beautiful conditions. It's a long way from Ireland to Japan, expensive. He gets out of the water. He's not very happy. And 5 minutes later, this massive storm hits. And then he went, okay, now I kind of understand.
Yeah. And down in the southern hemisphere, we have the Cook Strait in New Zealand.
Cook Strait, again, between the two big islands of a country. Simon, you may have never heard of it. It's a place called New Zealand. I don't know wherever it is. Again, very fickle weather, very strong currents, colder water, and this swim has one of the unique rules in the sport of open water swimming. You're allowed to get out of the water for a 10-minute period upon the sighting of an aggressive shark.
Got it. Thank you very much. And Antonio, going back to your book, you actually have two editions, one in English and one in Spanish. Can you tell us if there's any differences and what are the nuances that might be different between the English version and the Spanish version?
Well, the text is the same. As I mentioned earlier, we had to edit it for the Tonio facts, and worse, for the Adam facts. There's a great story that I'd love to talk about, is that there were only two persons who were able to do editing on the book. One was Jimena, my daughter, and the other was Lucia, my wife. And Jimena came with some questions about what I was writing, in terms of, do you really want to say this about these people? I mean, they can come back to you and say, what did you write that? And then there was Lucia, because there's a chapter where I tell how I met her. And Adam just got on writing, and it was just like, I was like more like James Bond than an open water swimmer. I mean, after 20 minutes, Lucia was in my arms. So that when she read that, she said, I mean, that did not happen. I mean, that's not how I remember it. So that was a big change. I mean, we had to edit that. And, so I finally said, Lucia, just write what you think we should put there. And so she was the
I
first.
just write what I'm told. I just write it straight as I'm told.
But when we decided, we were Adam. The English was written originally in English, and we were deciding what the title would be. And Adam came with this idea that would be the Forever Swim. And in English, it sounds great, and it's a story about swimming. And as you know, Lucia is a psychoanalyst, and she told me, you know, we were thinking in Spanish, you could put it por siempre nadar, no? It wouldn't translate well. So she said, well, forever is para siempre, forever, para siempre, interminable. And then she said, well, when I read the book, this is something that Lucia said, I looked at it, and even though, you know, we've been together for more than 25 years, when I read the book, she said, I see that you struggle all your life. You really struggle to go where you wanted to go. And she said, well, this is just what our life is. Our life is a struggle. So why don't you put the name of the book, Travesía Interminable? And that's how, it's a big change from English to Spanish. But when I think about the titles, it means a lot to me, because in Spanish is, when I think about the book in Spanish, I think about the book of my life, how I had to struggle since I was a little kid, and all the things that happened in my life and still happening today. And when I think about the book in English, it means what I did to go to the States. And I'm very happy that two of my American brothers have joined us, Grant and David Lee. And the book is dedicated to Shirley and Bill Lee, because they were the ones who adopted me. And that's how I went back to the States, and I was able to finish high school and go to Stanford. So for me, swimming is English. And that's why it's the Forever Swim. In Spanish, when I think about the book, it's my life. So it's a good question. It's a comparison between my swimming career and my life. And in the title, either in Spanish or in English, that's what it describes.
Wonderful. And what really strikes me about this book initially is the cover. The cover photo is just so striking. Where was it? Who took it? Where were you in the world when you took this photo?
Well, the photo of the cover of the book, I have to be honest, to all the people who are listening and watching us, is I always wanted to have a picture by one of the most famous photographers. So I wrote her, and she said, yes, we can make a picture of you, and that will cost about a figure in six numbers. Were you willing to do that? So I said, no. I like my picture a lot, and Ned is laughing because, you know, my ego is very big, but my ego is not as big for that picture. So I had to decide to do something else. So we went to another photographer, and we went to New York and talked to him, and he's a very famous photographer. You know, he was the photographer, the head photographer for Vanity Fair. And when I'm there, he tells me, and who's gonna design the book? And I had written some of the books, but nobody hadn't told me that you had to design a book. So I talked to a friend of mine, Karina, and I said, well, I have this thing that I have to design the book. So we went to Texas and met Chris Hill. And he said, I told him, I want a picture that shows how small I am in the ocean, how small people are against nature. So we had a great drone picture from the Cook Strait that unfortunately we couldn't use because there was not high resolution. So I went with Rafa, my coach, and my nephew Pablo, and that picture took about 3.5 hours to get the right picture. So we're doing back and forth, and the same thing in the back. It was just trying to get the mood that, and what I wanted to put in the front cover was that I was very small in front of the ocean, because I think we don't conquer the oceans, we don't conquer the mountains. The oceans, in my case, have always been very friendly to me, and have allowed me to swim and cross them safely.
Wow. And then, Antonio, you're obviously, you grew up in Mexico, you're educated at Stanford University, one of the world's most foremost educational institutions. You're multilingual, but when you're doing these swims, many of these places, most of these places, frankly, you have English-speaking crew. When you're swimming, are you thinking in English or Spanish, German? What do you think? How do you communicate with yourself?
It just changes very quick. Usually when I have a kayaker, like in Catalina, or in Cook Strait, we have the captain with you, Dan Simonelli. You usually kayaks for me. I'm thinking in English because I have to communicate to them in English. And when I have to communicate with the boat, it's usually with Nora and my crew. So I communicate with them in Spanish. But while I'm swimming, I swim thinking in Spanish. But I know when I approach either the kayak or the boat, I will have to be thinking in the language, whoever is there. Fortunately for me, he has offered his help. And Simon has told me, I want a kayak for you. So I said, well, I won't be able to understand you, Simon. So, we could go for dinner, we could go for a beer, but don't kayak me.
What do you think when you're drinking Irish whiskey?
No, the guy, which I'm enjoying it. I have been fortunate to be able to, when I was living in the States, Shirley, my American mother, always asked me the same question. And the day I knew I was going to be able to at least understand and be able to speak at least properly in a conversation is when I was playing water polo and I could swear and understand what they were saying to me. And when I dreamt in English, the moment you start dreaming in another language, you have it there. And so that's how I knew I was speaking English properly.
Yeah. One quick question. When you get stung by a jellyfish, what word comes to mind first? The Spanish word or the English word?
Well, I would have to say it in Spanish, but then it would be banned. So I won't say it, but which is very bad wording. Very bad wording. And Brad is laughing, my American brother, Brad Howe, is laughing. Brad, show you your spirit. I mean, show the spirit to the cameras.
My spirit, my shirt is my spirit, man. I'm Antonio's good luck charm. I'm very expensive, 6 figures, buddy. Look at that. He can't go without, he gets nervous.
I wanted to ask Brad a question because I haven't seen you. Are you happy with your depiction in the book?
Yeah, Antonio, he's generous. He's generous. I'm happy. Antonio probably didn't mention that I helped him through Stanford. He was limping in his first couple of years there, but I did his homework for him. That's how he made it through.
Well, if you want to find the real answer to that, please read the book. Then you'll find the real answer to that, to just what Brad said. I won't take time to discredit that comment. You just read the book.
Yeah. And,
yeah, I think if you read the book, you'll find that these are two of the two people in Stanford history with perhaps the lowest SAT scores in the history of Stanford University.
I mean, you could have waited for that. I mean, what people will see in the book.
I'm gonna have to buy all those books so nobody reads that.
Just tell them that you're the reason that all of the colleges and universities in the U.S. have now decided not to use the SAT, because clearly it's not a good measure.
That's right.
Thank you.
Well said.
Great seeing you.
Yeah. When you and Simon were bantering back and forth, I noticed there was one of the finishes that actually Simon has behind him. Simon, if you could show people, go ahead.
Yeah.
And
so Antonio, do you want to just tell us what that picture is of?
Yeah, that was that was a tough day. There's no easy days in open water swimming, and that was the end of the Cook Strait. And I had been struggling for about 4 hours to be at the end of the swim. And Philip, when I was approaching, I was saying, "Where do I need to go?" I mean, just see, the finishes in the Ocean 7 they're different. Some of them you go to a beach, and some you just go to and touch a rock. And this is a big rock, but I didn't know which one of the big rocks he wanted me to touch. So in that picture, there was a lot of seagulls from New Zealand. And it was so beautiful because as I approached and I touched, all of them flew. And so it was a very nice welcome. I probably was, that was the nicest part of my swim. When I think about that swim, I always remember those seagulls swimming. It was beautiful.
And Ned knows this quite well as the chairman of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. In our sport, we have so many people who are older. They set records, they set Guinness World Records. They do unbelievable things. And Antonio, you're 58 when you finished the Ocean 7. At that time, the world's oldest man to complete it. But your goals are still continuing. I mean, what other sport is it where you're at 58 and you still have more extreme things to do?
I don't think there are that many, And when I think about open water swimming, I think about triathlon. As you know, I started triathlon in Mexico, and then I helped triathlon to become an Olympics sport. And I did many triathlons, even I've completed 5 Ironmans before it became very popular to do Ironmans. And I don't think that people, now I'm 61, and I still have goals. And I think that's what open water swimming allows you. It's a sport that you can be swimming at, as I always say, your famous question is, what are you going to be doing with your 90? And my daughter and my son are watching, and I hope one of my grandchildren swims with me, Catalina, when I'm 90. They'll be very happy and very proud. But it gives you, and Ned knows it, and Ned is trying to set a record. I don't know how, the marathons in 100 long swims, and that's what open water swim brings. And as Diane was saying, when you are in the Southern Rowing Club and the Dolphin Club, it's marvelous. I mean, the reason I became a member of the Southern Rowing Club is because there's a guy called Dominic, and he's the first one before I joined the club, because I know it starts at 6. Because now I have a card, I can come at 5:30 or 5 o'clock, and I can sneak in and start swimming. And Dominic is a great athlete, and he told me his stories about the marathons and the triathlons, and he swims every day. And you can see, I'm so excited to see older people than me still swimming, and that's to me, it's the only sport that you can enjoy until you go at the end of your life. And if you ask me the question, how would I like to die? And I know this is not nice to say, but if I had my choice has to die, I would like to die swimming. That would be wonderful for me.
Antonio?
Eaten by a shark?
Antonio, no, Antonio. You want to die after you finish the swim on the way back to the boat.
Okay.
Okay.
Antonio, I'll be swimming with Dominic tomorrow morning, so I'll give him your best.
Yes, do that. He was so wonderful. He was the one who told me I could be a out of town swimmer. I'm not an out of town swimmer. He told me you can join. It's very easy. I thought you had to have I have an accent, but not as yours. So I thought I had to have an Australian accent to be able to belong to the club. But when Dominic told me, give him my regards. I mean, I really, you, Miguel, Dominic, especially Dominic in the mornings, he was somebody who inspired me so much, because I would see him, the way he entered the club and the way he swam and the stories he told me in that sauna, that I have a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, he's a world-class ultramarathon runner as well.
Huh.
Yes. Yeah.
And Adam, sorry about this. Can you summarize for everybody what this book is about? Does it include photos? And if I'm, going on Amazon, why would I actually select this book? What attracts? What are the type of readers who would enjoy a book like this?
Well, I mean, it's you have a mix of incredible adventure stories of a guy who's the oldest ever to complete the Ocean 7, at least at the time. I think you still are, right, Antonio? 58 still the oldest?
No. Liz Frey became the oldest person at 60. Liz is a great friend and a great swimmer, and she's the oldest.
Cheers to Liz.
Yeah, she's
Cheers to Liz.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, like I said, it's a story of Mexico and the evolution of Mexico from a time where it was not considered one of the world's growing and great economies to becoming what it is today, and through Antonio's eyes. So you follow him from when he's a young guy watching the first Mexican swimmer ever to win a gold medal in the Olympics and jumping up on his grandparents' sofa to training to actually try to join the Mexican Olympic team, and then moving on to Stanford and everything after that. And so you're looking at the story of the growth of Mexico through a very interesting, personal, kind of intimate look at one person's life. So you get insider stuff in politics. You got, you have the fish out of water story of the Mexican guy coming to study at Stanford when a time when international students wasn't a big thing yet when he did that. So he's a trailblazer and kind of in that regard too. And so you have the buddy stuff with Brad. And so you have I think it has a lot of story. And it's interspersed with this incredible quest to finish the Ocean 7 and complete and become and kind of put his stamp on being a great swimmer. Because in his past, even though he always wanted to be a great swimmer, and I don't want to spoil too much, he put a lot of effort into becoming a great swimmer, and he's always been a great swimmer, but considered one of the great swimmers. And he never quite got his due. And the Ocean 7 was a culmination for him in some ways. Although he had been in the Marathon Swimmer Hall of Fame after finishing his second Triple Crown, but when he started the Ocean 7 quest, he hadn't gotten that accolade yet. And so it was kind of this beautiful culmination of a lifetime quest. So I think there's so much there, so much richness there.
Thank you. And Ned, you've read the book. What were some of your impressions, and what did it leave you?
I think for all of the swimmers in the Hall of Fame, they have a story, and the story is not always about the water. In the case of Antonio, I learned a tremendous amount about Mexico. I learned a tremendous amount about the government without causing Antonio to go to jail or be beaten up, and there are a few times in there where I found myself kind of looking in a mirror, going, "Yeah, I have that problem," or "Yeah, I have that problem," or "Yes, I am formed by some early failures in my life." And Antonio, while a great swimmer, not making the Mexican Olympic team, was a failure that dominated his life and still is today. It's one of the reasons he gets in the water today. And I just looked in the mirror and I said, I have some of the same stuff as well. So I just found it hit really, really close to me.
Thank you. And we have some people here who know Antonio quite well. Did anybody want to actually say some words, especially if you've read the book already?
I would like to ask somebody that I met in this quest, and it was a very, very special meeting, and at the Dolphin Club, and it was, we're looking at the aquatic park one afternoon with now I would call him not only my partner but a very well friend of mine, which is Quinn Fitzgerald. thing to say is that I brought a box. I didn't have the proper glasses for the thing. We had to bring you some glasses. So I would love to have Quinn. Can you say something?
Yes, Antonio, it's such a great day for you, and it really is a remarkable book. Kudos to you, Adam, and Antonio, and thanks so much for have the Dolphin Club and South End Rowing Club represented, but more of the Dolphin Club. Diane, that's for you. But Antonio and I met. God, that was over 2 years ago, I believe, and. You know, like most meetings with Antonio, there is ample tequila involved, and by the end of the meeting, we had decided to go into business together, and our next plan was to meet with Stephen Munatones and present our great idea, and it led to just a really wonderful partnership. I mean, there's no one more charming, big-hearted, but also intelligent and thoughtful as Antonio. It's such a rare combination, and I think that really comes out in this book, and I just feel really lucky to have him in my life. So cheers to you, Antonio.
Thank you, Quinn.
Thank you. Anybody else have a few words, good or bad, although I doubt there's any bad at all?
I'd like to say a couple of things, maybe because we've all been hearing about all these great things about Antonio, and in addition to not having made the Olympics, Antonio has two things that he's still regretting, and he might regret for the rest of his life. One thing is not having been a member of the Dolphin Club, number one, and the second thing is him having gone to Stanford as opposed to Cal Berkeley. So those are two things that I don't know. You know, I did not see it in the book, so I just wanted to raise them right now.
Go Bears.
Yeah.
No, but I really want to. I mean, the book made a huge impression on me. I adored reading the book. It was really reading like an adventure book. And one thing that I appreciated a lot was, you know, in addition to the text and the adventures and the words, the whole design. I mean, it is a beautiful book that you want to keep and you want to browse through every now and then. So I want to thank Antonio and everybody who was involved in writing and making this book, because the finished product is a piece of art. So thank you.
Mauricio, where did you first meet Antonio? Well, how did you encounter him?
Well, I first met Antonio when I was living in Spain. I am originally from Mexico as well, but I lived in Barcelona for 15 years, and my wife and I were we crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, and in getting ready to cross the Strait of Gibraltar, I contacted the person that I knew would be kind of the perfect person to give us advice, and Antonio was always extremely generous with his advice in helping us, guiding us through training and how to approach the swim, and in the swim itself, and also in fundraising for the swim, because the swim had two objectives: swimming and then raising money. And Antonio was extremely generous with his advice and his time on both goals.
Yeah. Antonio, is your daughter still on the line here with us?
Yes.
There you go. Now, when your father first tells you, I'm going to go to Japan, I'm going to New Zealand, I'm going to England, I'm going to Ireland, what's your first impression of what your
Great, we're going on a holiday. I always tell him, why can't he pick some more tropical and Caribbean destinations to go swim. Is there not an Ocean 7 and somewhere in the Caribbean we can go to?
Yes. Well, we'll do the circumnavigation 7, which is
Okay.
tropical islands for you. Antonio, put that on your list.
Yeah, but no, all joke aside, I've always, people have asked me this in several occasions, and it's very strange because the first time he swam across the English Channel, I was 6 years old. So I've grown up with a crazy swimmer father my whole life. So it really has stopped being something out of the, I wouldn't say it's not something extraordinary, because what he does is extraordinary. But in our family life, it has become the day-to-day. We already know that there's always something coming. There's always something in his mind. And it's really, for me, it's part of the way our family works.
Yeah. Have you
What did you learn about your father in the book?
Sorry?
What new things did you learn about your father when you wrote the book?
Well, when I remember when he gave us the copy to read the book, and as he said, we got a first preview so that we could edit anything we wanted to edit. And at that time, I was living in Boston. And I started reading the book as I got on the flight to New York, and I finished it by the time I got to New York. So I called him and I told him, Dad, you've done it. And this is also very thanks to Adam. I told him, I know this story up and down, and I still cried. I still laughed. I still felt every single moment. I still relived many of the moments of my childhood and my life. So I can't really say that I learned new things, because anyone that knows my father knows that he loves to tell stories and he loves to tell the tales of his life. So I've heard them all, but I definitely got a new narrative around them, putting side by side what he lived through in the swims with his life before me and with me in it. And I definitely just reinforced what I already knew of what a wonderful human being he is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ned, you've read lots of books, from dozens of swimmers. What is something that strikes you about Antonio's different, the same? Oops. Oh, wait a second. We can't hear you.
Many times the books have one story. Antonio's book has a bunch of different stories, and that's what makes it interesting for me. One minute, he's at the deepest, darkest moment in the swim where he thinks he's too old and he's not going to make it, and the next moment, we're in a Mexican election fight, and there's a couple, 3 stories that are going back and forth, and you never know as you turn each page which of those stories is going to be coming at you. And I just found that, and probably no credit to you, Antonio. I suspect that was all Adam's work, but it was really kind of fascinating the way that was all tied together.
Yeah.
Well, I told the story. I mean, what can I say?
Well, I think Antonio's story, what makes it so relatable to anybody, is that there are the failures and there are the successes. There are the pitfalls and there's the continued quest and to continue, to persevere. And that's what we all have to do, right? I mean, once you get to a certain age, you've had your days that didn't go right, and your battles that you fought and didn't win necessarily. And so to be able to do that and then still accomplish what you set out to do, especially on an athletic level, especially in middle age, and continuing to do it even today. I don't want to stomp on a question, but he's still training for other amazing swims coming up. So I don't know. To me, that's the universal aspect of it, is that we all fight, we all struggle, we all fail, and sometimes the failure can lead to the ultimate success. And that's the takeaway, I think, the universal takeaway of the book.
Got it. Adam, on this collaboration, is this a matter of months, years? How long did it take for you and Antonio to have a finished product?
Well, longer than Antonio expected.
Did he just send you an email with chapter by chapter and you went through it, or did he put an outline together and you rearranged everything? How was that collaboration?
No. I flew to Mexico. He flew to Malibu. We were in the same room together a lot of the time. Sometimes it was over the phone. So it was a mix of all the mediums. But there was a lot of in-person stuff, collecting the interviews, and then the transcribing the interviews and setting it up. And I think, what was it, 2 years from point to point, Antonio?
Yes, it was like training for the Ocean 7. It took me the same time to get the book out than to do Ocean 7. And it's, Mr. Skolnick has a way of writing things, and we had to translate the book as well.
Yeah, that's right. There was a 6-month period after I was done that it took to get the book out, right?
Yeah, we had to translate the book, but it was a beautiful collaboration. We hit it off, from the start, and it was in a mood of in different moods. It was even in breakfast, at dinners, at lunches, and over the phone. We never used Zoom in those days. That was, that's something we never did. It wasn't the Zoom era yet, but it was a lot of fun. I would
no
say that.
Zooms. No Zooms. We just was phones sometimes, but a lot of in person, right? Like the most of the early stuff was in person.
You know what is really interesting, Stephen, in our audience, is that the first time we went to Random House, I got a meeting with the chairman of Random House in Mexico, and we came with the book, and they said, we want you to write the 7 success stories from the Ocean 7. And sadly, I saw me, with all these advice books, they're just, the 7 of everything. And I said, no, I don't want to write that book. And they weren't very happy. That's why Random House didn't publish me. I said, we need to write this book that has a parallel between my life and the swims. And I think that was a big risk that we took, because at the end, the book is not it's not an easy book. I mean, it's not something that you can just go and label and say, put it in this corner in a bookstore. But I'm very proud of it. I mean, this is something that what I feel when I look at the book, and when people read it, I feel very proud, because we did something that I really wanted to do. If it sells well, it'll be great for the foundation, because all the proceeds of the book go to the foundation where we teach children in public school to swim. But it's more, what I'm really looking for is I'm going to be a grandfather pretty soon. Something that I really wanted for many, many years. So the big difference between some grandfathers and myself is that I'll be able to read my grandchildren my stories in the book. And so that'd be great. I mean, that's a great grandfather that can read the book, the stories from the book. They can take you everywhere. So I'm very happy about that.
Great. We'll wrap up shortly, but if you're going to swim until you're 90, Adam, is there going to be a sequel to this?
Hey, you never know. You never know. Antonio's not going to stop, that's for sure. And I'm a freelance writer. We don't retire.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for this special hour with Antonio and his co-author Adam, announcing the book, The Forever Swim. Thank you again.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Steven.
Yeah.
Gracias, Antonio.
Thank you.
Gracias, Antonio. Bye-bye.
Gracias.